People who think they've encountered a serial killer, what happened? Not me, but my uncle. His manager at the fast food place where he worked in high school invited him and another kid over to his place after work. My uncle and his friend declined, and were very glad they did years later when it became public what exactly his former manager, John Wayne Gacy, was doing to and with those kids he invited over. My uncle accepted a ride from Gacy. He wasn't supposed to be hitchhiking, but it was the 70s. At some point he got a bad vibe and jumped out at a red light. When Gacy was arrested he put 2 and 2 together. Edit. Since this got some traction, here's the full story. Uncle was 16 and decided to hitchhike home. Dude pulls over and he gets in. Immediately, the guy locks the car. As they're going along, this guy starts getting pretty creepy, saying things like we could go to the airport and I'll fly you anywhere you want. My uncle is very freaked out at this point and waits for his moment. He pulls the lock and jumps out at a light, and takes off running. He says the guy started following him, but by going through alleys and stuff he was able to shake him off. After he gets home, my grandma could tell something was wrong, so she asked him what happened. He admitted to hitchhiking and told grandma what the dude had done/said. Grandma got a baseball bat and they drove around town looking for the guy, but didn't find him. It was not too much later that they arrested him and the story broke. My mom rode her bike over and watched them take the bodies out from down the block, or so she says. I don't know if serial killer, but definitely trafficker or child predator. Some background. My stepdad was a truck driver, so often we would visit him at a local truck stop when he was near to grab breakfast, etc. My mother is not great. During one of these adventures my mom decided she wanted us to stay with stepdad in the truck. Sister was 11, I was 9. During this 2-week period. Lol. We were in a random truck stop in the Georgia. My sister and I went to go take a shower, because we hadn't for days, and shared a shower to save on money. I was in and out and waited in the hallways for my sister. A man came up to me and started asking questions. This happened in the early 2000s, so I had been taught stranger danger, but also was still being taught always be respectful to adults bullshit. I was giving him basic answers. But then he pushed showing me his truck. My tiny self was terrified, but I kept saying no, I can't. Eventually he got annoyed and just grabbed my arm and started pulling. In that moment my sister came out and snatched my ass back and we ran. Crying, telling my mom. I'm called over dramatic. If my sister didn't see me, I'm positive I would have never been seen again. I'm pretty sure I saved my sister from the same kind of fate. Also early 2000s, we lived in a country road, so there wasn't much around. A car came to a stop while me and my sister were outside playing and tried getting us to come to his car, asking for directions to Taco Bell. There was no Taco Bell anywhere around us. My sister was getting closer to the car and I grabbed her and ran to get our mom. Car sped off, scariest moment of both of our lives. The stranger danger stuff they drilled into us back then really was a lifesaver. A friend of mine mentioned one of his aunts still has love letters from school that Richard the Night Stalker Ramirez sent to her. It's just so crazy to think that someone going about their life has no idea that they've encountered a future murderer. I dated Alaskan serial killer Joshua Allen Wade's father for a bit prior to everything coming to light. I've actually been alone in the house with that kid, and that was terrifying after the fact. Whilst I was at university, I worked at a cafe in a local shopping center. One of our regular customers was a mom and son who would come at breakfast most mornings. The mom was delightful, however the son always seemed a bit off. Nothing major, just you'd say have a great day and he'd reply with yes. Anyway, one day he comes in without his mom and his breakfast. The next day his face is all over the news as he had just been arrested for murdering his mom. Edit, just to address some of the comments, the son was of adult age and reportedly suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. Mom was his carer. Not a serial killer, but he killed more than half of a whole family. Paid him to remove a problematic tree that I wasn't confident about cutting down without dropping it on my home. He convinced me to save the tree and just remove a few limbs that were dangers. He just seemed like a dude. A month later he murdered everyone in a house except a young girl whom he abducted. He stuffed the bodies of the mother's friend, son into the hollow of a tree. When his home was later searched, it was full of piles of leaves and wallpapered to look like trees, and the abducted girl was locked in the basement. Ohio. This sounds like Matthew Hoffman. It was a single mother. He did kill her and the survivor's only brother, as well as the mother's friend, dismembered them and hid them in the hollows of 60-foot tall trees using his arborist climbing equipment. This was in Howard, Ohio. This is a definitely encountered a serial killer rather than pretty sure. I grew up in a small town in North Wales, UK. The local cinema had been closed for 15 years, but a guy from out of town had reopened it. As kids, this blew our minds, as it was a rural area, with very little to offer in terms of entertainment, so it seemed unbelievable to us that we would actually have a cinema in town. On one visit to the cinema, I ended up needing to use the toilet during a film, so left the theater, walked through the foyer and into the toilet. There was no toilet paper, so I went back into the foyer and spoke to the cinema owner to ask if he had any toilet paper. I was younger than 10 at the time and very nervous about speaking to adults, but the owner was incredibly kind and friendly, gave me the toilet paper, and we had a conversation about the film and how happy I was that we now had a cinema in the town. I used the toilet, then went back into the theater. A few weeks later, the friendly cinema man was on the front page of every newspaper. He was Peter Moore. He wasn't one when I met him. Worked a retail job that sold iPhones at a high-end mall. Guy comes in carrying a Nordstrom bag, wearing Gucci sunglasses, and asks to buy an iPhone. While I waited for our Bo team to bring the iPhone, I'm making casual conversation with the guy. I ask what he does for work, says he's an actor. I ask if he's been in anything I might have seen, he says The Hunger Games. I say cool, who did you play? He mumbles something about being one of the tributes. Conversation somehow leads to him asking if I'm single. I told him I was engaged and he was visibly annoyed. His attitude was very arrogant, and he did a lot of uncomfortable/creepy staring that I noticed after he took off his sunglasses. I had initially asked him if he was eligible for an upgrade on his phone. He was confident that he was. Well, after checking his ID, standard protocol, and pulling up the account, nope, not eligible. But his brother's phone was eligible. He insists that he can use his brother's upgrade, but I tell him that stuff like this needs to be approved by the main account holder/authorized users. So he calls his stepmom and asks to use the brother's upgrade. His stepmom says no, and the guy throws a complete tantrum, saying that his brother is too young for an iPhone anyway, that he's fine using an older model, that he needs a new phone. Stepmom doesn't budge, yet I'm stuck there for at least 20 minutes while this guy yells at his stepmom, trying desperately to get his way. He leaves in a huff and I'm so relieved to get away from this entitled prick. The guy was Elliot Rodger. I looked him up. Never heard of Elliot Rodger before. He killed 6 people. I couldn't find him working as an actor on The Hunger Games. Maybe his role was very small or he just wanted to brag. But I found his dad working at the set as second unit director on the Hunger Games movie. Poor family. Edit. Oh god, I found his Wikipedia page. He is an incel and killed women to punish them for not sleeping with him. He's the most red pill incel that ever incelled. His dad was a producer on the Hunger Games. I ended up reading his manifesto where he talked about frequenting the mall that I worked at, and how he was also very envious of the actors in the Hunger Games when attending the premiere with his family. I am assuming he thought that lying about being an actor in the movie would make him sound impressive. My grandparents took me on a road trip and stopped in Shreveport to gamble. I sat on a bench and read for hours. Sounds shitty, but my attention span wasn't completely fried at that point and I was happy to read as long as anyone would let me. Another kid a couple of years younger was in the same situation, but he was not a reader. We start talking and eventually he starts telling me about the neighborhood animals he's tortured and killed. Cats, dogs, wild animals. He was an equal opportunity monster. Might have just been trying to impress a stranger, might currently have a crawl space packed with bodies, who knows. My ex's kid was like that. He had smashed a guinea pig with a Tonka truck multiple times because he said that it was making too much noise. When his sister was 2 weeks old, he took her out of the crib at night and tried drowning her in the tub. That was at his mother's house. I full-heartedly believe that the kid will be on the news someday for murder. Robert Lee Yates was an Army pilot flying O-58s while I was flying L-1s, same battalion but different company, at Fort Drum, New York. They would send us down to fly helicopter simulators once a year in Pennsylvania to maintain our instrument ratings. We would carpool in one vehicle. Bob had a van with shag carpet in the back, so he would drive about 5 of us during those trips. It was about a 4-hour drive, so we'd joke and tell stories to pass the time. I was a fairly new pilot who enjoyed hearing the veteran pilots tell war stories. Bob was a CW3 at that time and was a bit odd but nothing alarming. 18 years later we see him on TV being charged with multiple killings of prostitutes across several states. He had used a Corvette and a van for the killings. Yes, that same van. When I was 12-13 years old, several young girls were molested and one murdered in my city. We were told to be very careful. They also gave us a very vague description of the murderer. The very significant traits they knew of were that he had a darker complexion and 2 pale scars on his face, on each side of his eyes. One day after school I took the subway to go to the place where my mother used to work. It's in the edges of the city, it's not a busy area, so the subway was not crowded at all. I was sitting waiting for my stop when I noticed a guy sitting 10 meters from me. He was wearing a hoodie, but I could still see part of his face, and one of the things I noticed were two pale scars similar to what they described. He also had a darker complexion. As soon as I saw that, I immediately stopped looking and I got off at the next stop, trying to look as calm as possible. It was scary, especially because I was close to the type of his victims. Did you report it to the police/subway security? No, I didn't say it to anyone at the time. I didn't even have the courage to talk to a cashier at a supermarket back then, so going to talk to a policeman seemed terrifying to me. Gladly the days after they published better pictures, and I don't think any other attack happened. I'm definitely sure I have, because my cousin is one. We were quite close, before it was revealed to me and the rest of our family that he is a monster, and our last encounter was in September 2020, when he hugged and consoled me at my dad's viewing. His death wasn't related to the cousin. Roughly 6 weeks later he killed his final victim and was arrested 2 weeks after that. That's when we all found out the truth about him. The fact that he consoled you about your father's death makes the whole thing even more terrifying. I know serial killers can be charming, but it's absolutely bizarre to think that someone is capable of having that much empathy with no clear personal motive, in between killing strangers. I know. He also referred to my brother as his little buddy, and they were particularly close, which now makes me so angry because my brother is autistic, as was his final victim. 2 of the others had unspecific learning difficulties. I also set him up with a close friend of mine who fits in his victim pool, but thank God he didn't kill her. I assume it's because that would have been too close to home to get away with. Was his arrest public information? If you're comfortable sharing, who was he, or when or how did he get caught? I understand not wanting to share because it could be identifying to you. It's okay. Fortunately I don't have the same last name, thanks to my mom. Anyway, yes, his arrest and a lot that came after it is public info. His name is Harold David Holman III. He has victims in Germany, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The victim in Michigan was a case that had been cold for 16 years. I was at a shopping mall in Los Angeles, when a man approached me saying he was a casting agent/photographer. Immediately I knew something was off with the guy, because that's the #1 scam in the book, but he just gave off such vibes that I instinctively knew he was very dangerous. I politely took his card and made a mad dash to the H&M and hid in the dressing stalls. I alerted a staff member and they had security walk me to the car. The gift of fear is real and trusted. About 2 months later I had the news on in the background and I saw his face. He had been arrested for abducting and murdering a girl from Michigan. He approached her the same way he did me. Scariest thing ever. I believe there's a new Dateline podcast series out about it. I used to work in true crime television and I can't even listen to the podcast because it freaks me out of how close I was to this guy. As I said above, we have the gift of fear. For a long time, women were taught to be polite and ignore this even if uncomfortable. It's super important to trust your gut, and as MFM says, F politeness. One of the hardest hitting lines in the movie The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is delivered by the killer after he's discovered. He has captured the person who discovered him. They had already left the killer's house after discovering evidence. As they were walking away, the killer, previously a friend, spots them, opens the door, and says, "Hey, come have a drink, I have some news about your investigation," and the victim, after a moment of thought, accepts. Later the killer asks, "Why did you come back? You knew what I had done." And the victim doesn't really have a response, so the killer continues, "It's because the fear of causing offense is greater than the fear of pain." You wouldn't think so, but it is. I think about this all the time, because my gut has told me something is wrong on multiple occasions. Sometimes I'd listen and sometimes I wouldn't. It's tough because we are taught so early on not to be rude or cause a fuss. Always listen to your gut. Not me, but my grandmother. This was in Florida. She told me about how this man came up to her way back in the day saying he was injured and needed help. He was wearing a bright yellow shirt, not related, but I remember her pointing that out. She told him that she was really sorry, but she was in a rush to go because she was going to meet her sister to make plans for an upcoming family gathering they had planned, so she couldn't be of assistance, and pointed him in the direction of the nearest doctor's office. And just like that, she left. It was Ted Bundy. She said the look in his eye was the most sinister thing she'd ever seen, and that she almost helped him, but decided against it last minute. My grandmother was an amazing woman. She was always helping people and saw the good in everyone. But she said he just had an evil look in his eye that she couldn't ignore. Oh, so strange. A few of my professors have met him. I went to school in Florida, while he was in solitary. They all said he was so charming and normal, but by the end he could snap to and from normal in the same sentence. We were having a family barbecue at my cousin's farm in the late 70s, early 80s, when my 12-year-old cousin decided to ride his bike to the store. Just after leaving, a van pulled over to him and the driver tried talking him into the vehicle. When that didn't work, the man got out and tried to force him into the van. My cousin kicked and screamed and refused in every way possible to get away. A passing car saw what was happening and stopped, which probably spooked the van driver. The guy got back into his van and drove away immediately. My uncle, who was a member of the RCMP, had heard the commotion, had jumped into his car and drove to see what was going on. He managed to catch up to the van and arrested the guy for attempted kidnapping. Unfortunately, the charge didn't stick and the guy was eventually let go. The man's name was Clifford Robert Olson. We're pretty sure that my cousin might have been one of Olson's first attempts. Traveling out of state for a vacation with my kids at a gas station, and this man starts trying to talk to my young daughter. I immediately got between them, but not before my daughter blurted out exactly where we were going and how long we would be there. I suddenly felt sick. Something about the guy scared me. I just knew there was going to be a problem. I hustled the kids back to the car and waited to drive away out of fear he might follow us. I didn't see him come out, so eventually I drove off, but I was paranoid about it afterward. 2 days later I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone banging aggressively on our door. He was screaming that he was with security for the complex and that there was an intruder seen in the area, so I was required by law to open the door. Obviously I didn't fall for that. He started swearing and threatening me. Suddenly he just stopped. Suddenly something spooked him and he turned and bolted. He had been standing kind of off to the side and reaching over to bang on the door in a way I couldn't see his face. When he moved, I saw it. It was the guy from the gas station. He followed us through 2 states. The actual security for the complex drove around but never found him. There was a broken gate next to the condo that they said he got in through. That is Stephen King level of scary. It scares me so badly when I think about how I was on high alert and still didn't notice him until he was on my doorstep. I ended the trip early and never saw or heard anything else, but my daughter had nightmares about him breaking into our home for years. This isn't just a kid thing. I do research in a remote part of Africa, and the first thing I tell my research assistants is nobody needs to know exactly where we're going to be. Not even people who would seem to be no threat at all. Who knows who they might tell? My grandmother swears she met David Parker Ray, aka the Toy Box Killer. My grandfather was stationed in Fort Bliss, so she took her 3 daughters camping in Elephant Butte State Park, the same place where he was a ranger. She said a ranger kept trying to get them to stay in his trailer instead of camping by the lake. Obviously they refused and went on a hike, but when they came back their campsite was trashed, so she packed them all up and drove home in the dark. When I got into true crime and was telling her how close he was to us, she relayed the story, and when I showed her a photo she said that it was definitely him, just aged a bit. Not his usual MO, but this would have been in the mid-70s and no one's exactly sure how long he killed for. I met the murderer of Grace Mullane. Not a serial killer, but on the day he was figuring out how to hide the body. So the night after he killed her, he came into the block of shops I was working at and was looking for a suitcase. He stopped by my store and asked and didn't buy them, so went the warehouse next to me. That week I got stopped numerous times going home as the police were looking for a shovel, coming to find out the shovel was across our store at the car wash as he left it there. I even talked to the employee and was wondering why there was a muddy shovel left in one of his slots. You can see on videos him taking the suitcase in the elevator, which was bought in the store next to mine. The fact that he looked normal, acted normal and bought all these things still spooks me. You would never know. Poor girl. Oh boy, my time to shine. Mentioned this story a few times on random Reddits. Back in the 80s, me and my parents lived out in Kansas. My father would work as an electrician for new homes during the spring to fall months. Winter months would pick up random jobs over the winter. One year he was working at ADT out of Wichita, and one morning it was too cold and he could not get his truck to start, so his coworker drove by and picked him up. After their shift, he dropped my father off. My father invited him in to come meet his family. My father introduced him to us. He said, "You can call me Uncle Dennis." This confused me as a kid. I was 7 or 8 at the time, as I just met this guy and I had an uncle named Dennis that lived down the road from me, and this guy sure as hell is not him. He then proceeds to grab me and pick me up. I was a fat kid. My parents did never pick me up and it was kind of freaky to me to be picked up like that. He then went on to talk to my mom and dad for a bit. I went off to go play with toys or watch TV. Flash forward a bit, it's now 2005. I am now in a completely different state, still living with my father who was in need of care, My mother passed away years before. The news comes on and a familiar face is on the screen. I raced downstairs as fast as possible and turned the TV to that channel for my father. I watched my father turn pale. The news announced they arrested Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. This was my father's coworker at ADT. My father was silent for a moment before he responded something along the lines of, "That motherfucker." I thought it was odd when he made the comment too. "My mother, you better watch out with being home alone out this far in the country, you're about the same age as the BTK victims." TLDR, for a brief moment in the 1980s my father's coworker was the BTK killer.